Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook Champions League podcast, bright and early today. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as always by the trio of Adrian, Clarke, Mark O'Hare, Miguel, Delaney. Guys, welcome along.
Good morning.
Adrian,
Hello.
Adrian seems very chirpy this morning. I don't know what it is.
I can't think. Yeah, it was. I'm exhausted. Having been at Emirates Stadium yesterday to watch a really good game, 3-2 to Arsenal. I had to work very hard for it, but yeah, ultimately, I think the second half performance warranted the 3 points, and yeah, little bit of maybe good fortune here and there for the team with the decisions, but overall. You can see that Liverpool are regressing. They're an aging team. They're not quite in the right place at the moment. But yeah, this Arsenal team, they could very well be the best of the rest, behind City, of course.
Yeah, you can't really wipe that smile off his face, in fairness. We'll discuss that further on the Weekend Football podcast. But for those that are new to the pod, we're going to cover 4 marquee games: Milan, Chelsea, Celtic, Leipzig, Napoli, Ajax, Barcelona versus Inter, any other bets and best bets. And before we get into it, if you are watching on YouTube, either live or on the stream back, do give us a like, hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening on the podcast, we'd love a parental review if you're enjoying the content. So let's get straight into it. We'll start with a big game for Graham Potter's Chelsea, given they did have a great win, but it's the away tie in the return leg away to AC Milan. We'll take a look at the betting first, as we have it on at matchbook.com. We got AC Milan at 3.25, Chelsea short enough at 2.42, the draw available at 3.5. Both teams to score yes is 1.82 and 2.12 no. The handicap, Milan getting a quarter of a goal start at 1.91, and the goal line is 2.5, slightly shaded towards the under. So we will start with you, Miguel. So this is a game you're actually heading to. You're at the return leg as well. So obviously you picked these 2 games early on as 2 big games for Graham Potter's Chelsea, I guess, given that the Premier League, they may not be able to compete for a title this season. So Champions League is probably a good starting point for Graham Potter.
Yeah, I picked them partly because I thought these were going to be kind of juncture moments early on in his Chelsea career, especially given it probably started a little bit softly with that 1-1 draw against Salzburg. And yet, I also must say, like, even this time last week, we were talking about how the temptation to make all of Potter's Chelsea games 1-1, and yet, partly instigated by the last game against Milan and what they did the weekend, it suddenly feels like something might have clicked for Chelsea after a fair few weeks of coaching. And for that reason, and because of Milan's game at the weekend, which I think would have been somewhat emotionally sapping because it was Juventus, because of the amount of absence they have, and suddenly just because there's something nice about Chelsea right now, the way they're playing. I expect them to go here confidently, and I think I've gone for a Chelsea win and over 1.5. I think there'll be more than a goal in the game, so that leaves us open to kind of whether it be 2 or 3-0 again, like the first leg, although Milan will have to have some sort of response, or Milan offers that response. But I'm suddenly, just given the kind of dynamics behind this, I'm quite behind Chelsea. Again, in terms of making any sort of decision on Chelsea right now, we have such limited evidence to go on, because I do think Potter represents such a different type of coaching to Tuchel, and it's a different type of atmosphere as well. But it's quite encouraging right now.
Yeah, it was interesting. They made 7 changes, and Graham Potter does have that squad to do that. 2.94, incidentally, Chelsea, and over 1.5 goals. Mark, we'll head to you on this one, and your thoughts on maybe the reaction to Milan's performance in England. It was very much, Serie A, standard of Serie A and all that. And I didn't hear much of that when Napoli were battering Liverpool at the start of the season. So where are you at currently with Serie A and Premier League? Because you watch both leagues intensely.
Well, the Premier League is clearly a cut above the Italian top flight at the minute, and that's understandable considering the riches that the Premier League have. They've got the best players, the best coaches. It would be poor of the Premier League if they weren't sort of dominating these kind of duels. But I think Milan are better than what we saw at Stamford Bridge. And I guess coming into this match, I was willing to back both teams to score at Stamford Bridge at 1.9. So I don't see any reason why I wouldn't go in the same route again just 7 days later when it's around 1.82. And I know recency bias can cloud our thinking, and that's something we need to sort of establish, particularly with there's Matchday 4 as a replica of what we saw on Matchday 3, really. So it's difficult to sort of take yourself away from what we saw just a week ago. But I saw a Milan team that struggled with plenty of injuries. There's still those issues coming into this game. But they did get Teo Hernandez back at the weekend against Juventus, and he's a massive part of what Milan do in both defence and attack. He's basically their version of Kyle Walker, but on steroids. He's a rampaging influence down the left, huge amount of energy, creates plenty of goal threats, but also kind of mops up the damage as well when balls go in behind. So that's a big coup for Milan. The obvious one as well, it's home advantage at San Siro, big crowd on their side. And Chelsea haven't kept a clean sheet on their travels since the opening day at Everton. So, they were put under plenty of pressure in the first half at Selhurst Park against Palace not long ago. No reason why Milan can't. They switched system at the weekend against Juventus from 4-2-3-1 to 4-3-3. Giroud sort of central to the attack with Rafael Leao and Brahim Diaz either side. I think that's good enough to cause Chelsea problems. The issues that Milan have are down the right side. They basically got none of their first choice players in defence or midfield available. But yeah, I think there's enough ammunition there to cause Chelsea problems. And thirdly, despite what we saw in London, where Chelsea dominated and deserved the win, of course they did, Milan only managed 4 shots, but Krunic really could and should have scored. So it's not like they weren't sort of bereft of ideas or opportunities. And Chelsea definitely are trending in the right direction. They were better than the draw against Salzburg. Did think they rode their luck a little bit against Palace, but dominant against Milan and the Wolves. But, this is a different test going to San Siro. The expectations on them, I think Milan will show something better than what we saw in the first game. So, very impressive Chelsea's work in possession, their chance creation so far, but I'm still not totally convinced that they're the finished article defensively right now. So, I would just back that Milan team against most defences to score. So, as I say, backed it at 1.9 last week. It's only 1.82. And ideally, Milan are in a better place now than they were 7 days ago. So, happy to go in again.
Yeah, 2 goals angles from the lads, which I'm kind of 50-50 on which one to go for. And then we turn to Adrian Clarke, who's the opposite end of the scale. So make the case.
Going against the grain. I hadn't seen what the boys were going to choose, but I see it slightly differently. I do think Milan will be better, definitely. I think that was a little bit skewed. It was very one-sided, and I wouldn't imagine it would be the same again this time around in front of a big crowd. Obviously, they've been boosted, Milan, by the win against Juventus. See a low-scoring win by 2-0. And I just feel that Potter's teams just don't give up that many chances. Okay, Milan missed a big chance at Stamford Bridge, but that 4 shots against was the 3rd lowest in Chelsea's history in the Champions League. So, that's not a bad start for Graham Potter at home to a club like Milan with the players that they've got available to be able to keep them at bay. And I think that will be the priority in the game at the San Siro for Chelsea. They'll look to keep things nice and tight, nice and controlled, and it'll be down to Milan to go out and win the game. And I think it might be quite a cagey encounter. That's my gut instinct. Chelsea haven't been great on the road. We know that. They have a really bad record in Italy, actually. They've lost 6 and drawn 1 of their last 7 over there. So I wouldn't back Chelsea here necessarily, but having seen the first leg, you wouldn't back Milan. Maybe you need to go with the draw. But I just landed on unders. I just feel that Chelsea will not give up that many chances, and that maybe they won't be as attack minded, as purposeful at the other end of the pitch. I see a 0-0, a 1-0, or a 1-0. Obviously, it could be 2-0 either way as well. I see one of those score lines landing here personally. But I respect the opinions of my esteemed colleagues, and I can see where they're coming from too.
Yeah, this is a tough one to pick a bet for because there are 3 decent cases. In some ways, I can see where Miguel's coming from with the Chelsea angle and the ability to make 7 changes. Anyone want to make a last-minute case here, or am I on my own here?
Good luck, Dan.
I mean, it is such a difficult one to call, given it's going to Milan. It's a slightly different Milan, and again because we have so little to go off on Potter at the moment. It's probably worth maybe kind of leaning towards caginess a little bit.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's we've all got different reads on it, haven't we? So maybe it's one we should leave to the viewers and the listeners to decide. I'm not sure.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So listeners, you've heard the cases for pretty much 3 different angles here, but AC Milan versus Chelsea should be a good game. So both teams to score under 2.5 or Chelsea in over 1.5. So take your pick. As I said, the official ROI will be given in the best bets. So, but look, we like covering some of these marquee games, particularly given that there's a huge interest on them, obviously. So we'll go to a big game and probably the game of the week in terms of atmosphere, in terms of potentially a must-win game for the home side. So it's Celtic versus Leipzig, the return leg, and this was a cracking game in the early slot there the last week. So let's take a look at the betting as we have it currently on the Match with Betting Exchange. You can get Celtic at 3.3, Leipzig are 2.22 with the draw available at 4.0, a 3-1 shot. Both teams to score, yes, is 1.6. That's very short there with no at 2.56. And the handicap Celtic are getting a quarter of a goal head start at 2.04. And the goal line currently we have it at 3.0. And that's shaded towards the under at 1.89. So, Adrian, we're straight back to you. This was your game of choice. You saw there was no way we could cover these games without covering this one. This is set up to be an absolute belter if the away legs anything go by.
I think so, yeah. It was a great match. I mean, Leipzig probably should have won by more. I mean, they had a couple of disallowed goals, didn't they? I mean, they did wipe the floor with Celtic. Whenever they went at them in this match, they were incredibly dangerous. Celtic had their moments, particularly in the first half, but yeah, Leipzig played well. You flip it around, so the game goes to Celtic Park. Will it be any different? Well, I don't think so, personally. We know Ange Postecoglou wants to go for it. And they kind of need to, because they're on the brink, aren't they, Celtic? I think 3 points is really all that they should be playing for. One's not really going to do them too many favours. So I expect them to go for it. But they will leave gaps, won't they, for a Leipzig attack that's excellent, and Kunku is a top player. Szoboszlai, obviously, you know, you've got a number of players there. Werner's not in great form, but we know the threat he carries. So yeah, I can see goals in the game again. Celtic have had one clean sheet in their last 23 matches in Europe, which is not very good, is it? So the chances are that Leipzig are going to score at least once here. I'd back them to score more. Leipzig have a pretty bad record away from home in Europe. I see that, but they'll target this, and I think it'll be a cracking game. I'm not going to pick a winner. Celtic are capable of arresting that losing streak, but yeah, I would probably lean towards both teams scoring and Leipzig coming out on top. So yeah, my pick would be to go over the goals line. You said it was leaning towards the under. I fancy over 3 at 2.06. That's, yeah, anyone that watched the first match, I think would be surprised to see surprised to see a cagey return. I think this would be really open.
Yeah, Mark, you're in agreement here. I watched the Celtic versus St. Johnstone match on Saturday, and geez, they were poor at times. But I think a momentum win like that, given all the changes they've made, they'll go into this game looking to really attack Leipzig from the off.
Yeah, definitely. They have Cameron Carter-Vickers back at centre half as well, which is a big bonus. Yeah, they had 80% of the ball in the first 70 minutes against St. Johnstone, but they kind of struggled to penetrate that deep line defence. And they shouldn't have the same issues here. Leipzig aren't going to sit back and invite pressure on. It's not their kind of style. They're very much a proactive team. They like to play on the front foot, whether it's under Tedesco or Marco Rosa. So I don't think they'll have the same sort of issues in that sense. But yeah, ultimately, defensively, you've got to question them. Of Callum McGregor basically out for the long term now as well, which is a big miss for Celtic, their skipper. But on the flip side, Leipzig without their captain and goal scorer Peter Galassi as well, who's a big presence between the sticks, and the stand-in, the makeshift Blažević is definitely not. So there's going to be opportunities for Celtic here, and it's not a game you want to back the unders in. I don't think. We think we're all pretty much in agreement last week that we were expecting an open, exciting, expansive game. It absolutely was, and we sort of suggested that Celtic might not be able to contain that quartet of Nkunku and Andre Silva and Szoboszlai and Timo Werner, and they definitely didn't. Joe Hart certainly didn't help in terms of assisting Leipzig as well, but. Yeah, I did see enough in Celtic to believe that they can cause problems. They did manage 8 shots in the box last week. Leipzig only managed 12 in the same game. So back at Parkhead, knowing how important this match is, yeah, you'd expect Celtic to be much better. And as you say, Dan, the way in which they won that match at the weekend, just a madcap final few minutes in stoppage time at St. Johnstone, that could be the fuel that they require to kind of go and put a performance on under the lights on their Champions League night. We talk about it all the time. Bit of a stereotype, bit of a cliche, but it does tend to be the case. So I wouldn't be backing Leipzig at these prices, but I would be backing goals. And I think you can be slightly more pragmatic, as is my nature, but you can probably get over 2 3/4 goals here at around about 1.8 or just below it. And that means we get a half stakes win if there's exactly 3 goals and a full stakes if there's 4 or more. I do expect this to be pretty end-to-end, pretty exciting, pretty entertaining. Leipzig on the road, that's where they are vulnerable. They've conceded in every game in the Bundesliga and Champions League away from their home base. And I think Celtic can score, but you don't back them to keep a clean sheet either. So, yeah, expecting a good game here.
Yeah, you set it up well. And Miguel, you've been the king of getting over 3.5 goals in. You got it in at the weekend again. So you're doing it again.
Yeah, I'm going. I mean, I agree with everything Mark said there, but I'm just going to be a bit more bullish about it. Because I do think kind of context sharpens it as well. This isn't just kind of, I mean, I totally agree in the weekend. I think that could be a bit of a spark for Celtic. But also, this is essentially their Champions League now. And in those sort of nights, I mean, usually traditionally, we wouldn't have got them until match week 5 or match week 6. You do see chaos. And given the atmosphere, given it's a home game against a team they would seek to overtake, I think that's what we're going to see here. Again, everything Mark said, or the two boys have said about general play, I think informs this. And yeah, it's why this, I mean, it's not just going to be goals. I think it's going to be probably the game to watch this week because it could really set off. Maybe a little bit of edge from the first game as well. But yeah, I'd be very bullish about it. Maybe not quite to the point where I'm like last week where I was regretting, maybe I should go over 4.5. No, I think people was quite nicely balanced for it. And I'd be fairly confident about it.
Yeah, I listened to the 1 minute clip of your Arsenal Liverpool over 3.5, and there was just regret that you hadn't gone more. So it's funny watching that back afterwards.
Yeah.
Massive regret.
We had that by half time, did we?
Yeah. But yeah, I think the safe thing to do is to split it in the middle with Adrian shed over 3.0 goals. That split your stakes at 2.5 and 3.5 at 2.06. But it depends on your nature as a punter. If you want to play it safe with Mark, if you want to be aggressive like Miguel, there's a lot of options covered there. So we split the middle. We'll move on to the third game we're going to cover, and this is Napoli versus Ajax. And for those that haven't, I would recommend checking out the Napoli highlights there over the weekend. Some fantastic goals last 20 minutes. But let's take a look at the betting. Napoli 1.65 currently. Ajax are 5.5. The draw is available at 4.7. Both teams to score yes is 1.64. Again, another short price. And Ajax are getting half a goal start on the Asian line at 2.5. And the total goal line is 3.0, and that's a good bit shaded towards the over. So yeah, Mark, Napoli this they are Europe's team. It's rare you kind of get. I know Atalanta did it previous, maybe a couple of seasons ago, but it's rare you get a team that are going up both fronts in both Serie A and the Champions League. Do you know what I mean? And it just feels that this Napoli team is coming. They're backing it up with domestic performance, and even though they weren't amazing at the weekend, they still managed to win 4-1 away from home despite not being at their best.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of waiting for the balloon to burst a little bit with Napoli. Yeah. It tends to be the way with them. You know, if you look at the last season, they had a tremendous campaign domestically, and they were very much in the title running. But when the pressure came on, they were picking up some big results and then kind of going to the likes of bottom half teams and flopping really. So, but it's 8 wins on the spin now, which is the first time they've done that in their history across all competitions. There's a huge buzz around the place at the minute, but they are on the verge of something special. But you know, we're only in October, so you know, can they sustain this for the whole campaign? My answer would be absolutely not. But you know, can they stay in the running for these competitions? Yeah, absolutely they can. So I was fairly confident in my pricing last week that to question the odds, I think that Napoli and Ajax were rated around equal, and therefore Napoli were the value bet in Amsterdam. Ajax do still have plenty of talent in their squad. If you look at the bench, you look at the team sheet, there's players of kind of caliber there. But you know, you look at their performances, they barely had a sniff at Liverpool on Matchday 2. We've seen how Liverpool have defended recently, and we talk endlessly about these changes on and off the field that Ajax went through in the summer. I think there's valid questions around the appointment of Alfred Schroeder as the replacement for Ten Hag. Probably not been pinpointed enough, but I think there's probably issues in the hierarchy there about why they've gone down that route. But anyway, I think it's the fact that when they fell behind last week, Napoli, to turn it around, basically hand Ajax their biggest ever European defeat in such emphatic circumstances was just a joy to watch, really. They Ajax were exposed hopelessly for their stupid defensive line and just looked directionless and hopeless for a lot of that. But Ajax were Napoli were just, it's hard to put into words how good they were. We saw them destroy Liverpool in Naples and ride the Ibrox storm against Rangers. But just look at the numbers against Ajax in Amsterdam. They won the shot count 26-8, 20 shots from inside the penalty area, over 3.5 expected goals. It was a paddling. And what I love about this team is there's just an intensity to continue to pile on the punishment for opposition teams. It's almost like German levels of ruthlessness that Spalletti's installed in this team. And it's a joy to watch. He didn't rotate too much at the weekend. Zielinski wasn't fully fit, so he was on the bench. They did pick up an injury to Ramani, the centre half, which will mean they might need to make a change there. But I think back in Naples, this is a team who are already leading the attacking metrics for expected goals, shots on target in the Champions League this season, despite being in a really difficult group. It's hard not to continue riding that wave against an Ajax team who have looked indifferent for a few weeks now. Even at the weekend against Volendam, a newly promoted team, they're in the ascendancy and then almost chucked it away again. I think their confidence is fragile, and I think Naples probably isn't the best place to go when you're sort of questioning yourselves. So I think Napoli can continue this winning streak, and I back them to win and back over 1.5 goals on top. You get it in around 1.76, I think, basically back in the home win by any scoreline. It's not 1-0. That appeals to me.
Yeah, and it's a similar story to the last game. Adrian, you're a step up and you're going to go for Napoli and over 2.5 goals. But tell us about this Napoli team. Watching them is a joy at the moment.
It really is. They look exceptional, don't they? Is it a little bit like Arsenal? They're probably even more impressive than Arsenal in the Premier League, aren't they? But it's the sort of underdog that's coming through and really shining. Just love the attacking mentality, as Mark was talking about there. They're just in irresistible form. Obviously, a number of players just flying at the moment. Raspadori, Simeone's son has looked good, hasn't he? Kvaratskhelia is good. Zielinski. I mean, everywhere you look, there are players that are banging them in for fun. I think 23 goals in their last 7 matches. I mean, Mark's shout, pre-tournament for them to be the dark horses is looking genius, isn't it? They'll get qualification, won't they? If they'll secure it if they win this game. So that's a good motivation. And having watched the vast majority of that game against Ajax, you can't back against anything other than a repeat, really, in terms of the outcome being Napoli winning the match. It won't be 6-1 again, I'm sure of that, but yeah, the way that Ajax defend, the way they were caught out consistently by the quality, the power, the movement, the speed of Napoli's attacks, I just see it happening again. I can. So Napoli for me. Plus, I'm just going to go a little bit bolder and over 2.5 goals. Taking the Miguel Delaney route. But it's not really, is it? Yeah. If it was Migs, it would be Napoli and over 5, wouldn't it? That would be his...
Wait. We'll hand over to you, Miguel.
Yeah, we've gone for an escalation again. It's interesting looking at that tweet here, isn't that? Mark, Napoli over 1.5. Adrian, Napoli over 2.5. Miguel, Napoli over 3.5
sums it up, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah, there is a sense that eventually, or that instinct, the bubble has to burst. But I think while they're going with it, and again, it's the context of the game as well. It's the form Ajax are in, it's going to Naples, all the issues around Ajax, the momentum running through Napoli, and also that this is pretty much the game. I mean, they're into the last 16 anyway, but this is the game to completely make it clear. Meaning, there's going to be no let up. So I just think it'll run along exactly the same theme, and it'll be goals again, and we may as well enjoy it. And try to maximize it. It's interesting in the longer term as well. I mean, Napoli actually, they could be one of those sides now that actually benefits from the World. I think most of the top sides, the World Cup will just distort their season in unknown ways. Whereas Napoli, I mean, people might say, because I was actually thinking this as regards Arsenal yesterday as well, in that it might come at the wrong time, that it just takes away momentum. But I think what would happen more likely with Napoli is that they would start to lose momentum in the way that happens to these teams. And then kind of there is always a danger of a season fizzling out. Where who knows now? The World Cup might actually come at a time that just gives them that break, gives them kind of I mean, they won't have too many players there, especially given the changes in the summer.
Yeah,
and then they can come back kind of revitalized. We might see the same again from the end of December, start of January. But for the moment, they've still very much got that momentum. as Mark said, there was one or two changes the weekend as well. Yeah, and I'd be very confident about them just picking up from where we were in the last game.
Yeah, there's goals in this game, and again, take your pick if you're listening. Napoli and over 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5 all put up. 3.5 is available 3.45, but we're going to go with Adrian's selection. I think split it down the middle again. Napoli and over 2.5 at 2.2 as the official bet on Matchbook. But again, take your pick there. There's plenty of ways to go about it, and yeah, there's definitely goals in this game. You can feel it for sure. So we'll move on to probably the marquee game. I put it in last year, given it's Wednesday 8 o'clock kickoff, and we'll just take a look at the betting as we have in a Matchbook betting exchange. Big game. Barcelona 1.45. Inter are available at 7.6, despite winning last week. Draws available at 5.0. Both teams' scores 1.85 yes, 2.14 no. And the handicap, Inter Milan getting a 1.25 goal head start at 1.94. And the goal line is 3.0. Pretty much 50-50, but very smallly shaded towards the under at 1.93. Adrian, we'll go for you on this one. This is a massive game given last week's result and for the future of Barcelona, and given the project of putting a lot of money into for the short term at least, and having a team to compete for a Champions League really, as well as La Liga. Where are you at this game at the moment? Because
they've made a healthy profit. They haven't made a healthy profit, but they've got to make a profit again, haven't they? And they need to stay in the Champions League, and this is a big game for them, isn't it? It was a strange one last week. It was a game of very few chances, wasn't it? I think Inter had 5 shots. Barca only had 7. Barca had almost all of the ball. I guess it'll be a similar story, maybe even more exaggerated at the new camp. So it's a case of, can Barca grind Inter Milan down and keep the back door shut? I mean, it's been a good week, hasn't it, for Inzaghi, with that win, the narrow win, and then beating Sassuolo away from home. So the pressure's eased a little bit on here. I still think Barcelona are slightly the better team, even though it's not really clicking for them in the final third. I mean, 4 of their last 5 games, I mean, this can't have happened too often. 4 of their last 5 games have seen under 2.5 goals. The last 3 games for Barcelona have just had 1 goal in them. I mean, this isn't the usual thing for Barcelona. It's just not firing and clicking and gelling inside the final third. Teams are sort of making them work very hard to create chances, and Inter will be the same. But hand on heart, do I think that they're good enough to win the game with the individuals that they've got? Yeah, I do. I really fancy Barcelona in front of their own fans to nick a low-scoring win. That's how I see it. I think you could probably flip the first score around and give it to Barcelona this time around, 1-0, 2-0 potentially. That's how I see this. Inter Milan don't have a very good away record, particularly against Barcelona. Inter have lost 7 of their last 8 games in Spain in European football, so they don't travel brilliantly to this part of the world. So I can't fancy Inter here. I'll get behind Barca, but because of the pattern of the first game, because of Barca's form and a series of low-scoring games, I think that will be repeated here. So Barca and under 3.5 will be my selection.
Yeah, Miguel, Adrian alluded to there the low-scoring games, and at the weekend I didn't think they were impressive at all, but they dug out that 1-0 win at home to Celta Vigo, 7 wins from 8 in La Liga, top of the league. Where are you at with Barcelona at the moment? Because last week, while the performance was okay, the result was very disappointing.
Not very convinced, I say. Even I watched the highlights of the game just to get a little bit more of a sense. But even on the night itself, I was watching the goal show, and every time I went to the San Siro, and it was a Barca chance, it was invariably the same. He was usually out to one of the wingers, and mostly out to Dembele, with him swinging a ball in, and Inter actually dealing with that quite sharply. And I take all of Adrian's points about Inter's form in Spain, and also there's that instinct that kind of Barca it will flip, that they should get the result. And I suppose there is an element maybe kind of dependent on game state. If Barca were to get an early goal, it could open out. But just from the way they set up, from what does seem a bit of a lack of rhythm with Barca right now, and also maybe just kind of a bit of a doggedness about Inter, given the last 2 results they've got, and given that Inzaghi seems to have got a bit of a reprieve, I can actually see this game going along a similar way. It's going to be a very nervous night for Barcelona, I think, and it's why I suppose the temptation is to almost go for under 2.5. has been suggested. But I think I'm going to go for a cagey kind of both teams not to score, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. Currently priced at 2.1.
Good price,
Mark, over
isn't
to
it?
you. Yeah, Mark, over to you and you touched on this in an earlier game about recency bias. I think this is probably a prime example that, given the result, you might be thinking maybe Inter could get something here, but you're still convinced that Barca are ultimately the better team here and a decent price still.
I think price-wise, they're probably still a bit short. But football, a week is a very long time in football. We talk about it all the time. And 7 days ago, Barcelona are being talked about as legitimate contenders for the Champions League as well as La Liga. And suddenly now their Champions League future is on the line. So the manner of the defeat at San Siro was alarming. So was their second half display against Celtic on Sunday night. It's raised valid questions in possession, quite one-dimensional, lacking penetration, which you don't expect, but defensively lacking or vulnerable, I should say, to counterattacks and transitions. And Ter Stegen had to make some really, really important stops against Celta on Sunday night to preserve that win. So if you're into Milan, you would look at that game and think, well, we're going to have opportunities here if we play our cards right and approach this in the right way. So, yeah, Barcelona have been strangely kind of subdued in possession for quite some time. And that first game the reverse game last week was really low quality, dull stuff. Actually, to go into it really excited. It was a real turn off, really. But also on the horizon, it's got to be said, Barcelona have the Clásico this weekend as well. So it's a massive, massive week. And Xavi's admitted that things aren't working. They had 72% of possession at San Siro, and Miguel's sort of instincts and what he saw were bang on. They put in more crosses in that match than they ever have under Xavi. The majority came from Dembele, who was below par and didn't create a huge amount himself. So, but yeah, back at Camp Nou, different set of environments. It's a different match this altogether. And I just think if Barcelona can carve out one opportunity for Robert Lewandowski, he's going to score it. He doesn't go too many games without failing to score or being starved of opportunities. So I'd fancy them here. Inter still without Brozovic, which I do think is a big, big miss. The only thing, I'm going to be a bit more conservative, as is my normal way, but I'll try and explain the reason for it. Barcelona to win under 4.5 goals is 1.83. I think that's a nice leap on the Barcelona price just to win by chucking in under 4.5 goals. What I think's at play here is the head-to-head. So it's only 1-0. So Barca effectively need to win by 2 goals or more to get supremacy over Inter in the head-to-head. Inter will be well aware of that. So obviously, if they do fall behind, they're going to have to change their approach. They're going to have to be a bit more forward-thinking. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just try and grind out a defeat by a 1-goal margin and play on the goal difference elsewhere. But I do think the head-to-head is significant there. So something to bear in mind. Barca effectively will want and try to be winning by at least 2 goals to secure that head-to-head advantage.
Yeah, interesting plays from all, and I think I will lean a bit more pragmatic this time, Mark, and go with Barcelona and under 4.5. It's a staple of the podcast over the last couple of seasons. Currently priced at 1.83, which is pretty decent. So that's 3 official bets on the matchbook side of things. Let's quickly recap, and that's over 3.0 goals in Celtic versus Leipzig at 2.06, and Napoli plus a quarter of a goal at 2.22. And Barcelona and under 4.5 goals at 1.83. Insight.matchbook.com is the place to get all those bets. And we went 8 out of 11 on last week's Champions League bet, so that'll be up around Monday afternoon. So well worth checking that out. And we'll move on to any other bets here. And Mark, no better place to start, and it gives us an opportunity to speak a little bit about the game on Saturday. I hope the double screening went well with the Spurs game in the background. It did for me anyway. But all eyes were glued to Dortmund versus Bayern those last 20 minutes. Unbelievable finish, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I think Dortmund got what they deserved, really. Bayern were very flat and very poor, really. So I think it was a fair result at the end, but the manner of it and the fact it was, I can't even remember his name now, the Cologne striker who's been ostracised for pretty poor form, scoring the equaliser late on, a great moment. And yeah, I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier, actually, really, about a week being a long time in football. And this time last week, we talked about Sevilla being down on their knees really right at the end of the Lopetegui era, which, they basically played the game on Matchday 3 like it was a dead rubber, took a bit of a spanking on the scoreline. But actually, despite losing 4-1, they fashioned a lot of good opportunities. And, for a team who won 4-1, goalkeeper Alexander Meyer for Dortmund had to work much, much harder than the scoreline suggested. Sevilla had 20 shots last week. They had 15 efforts inside the box and generated over 2 expected goals. And I just think it was probably another example, not just the weekend, but also last week, that Dortmund aren't yet or still aren't anywhere close to being a defensive force. I still think they're very gettable. And whilst I'm not expecting kind of the same open free-for-all of a game, I do think the state of play in this match and in this pool, we should see a very front foot Sevilla, Sevilla who are 5 points shy of Dortmund coming into this match. So defeat here, they're out of the Champions League, and sure, they probably want Europa League football, but I just think Lopetegui's gone now. Jorge Sampioli's back in. We saw an immediate improvement at the weekend, holding a very informed Athletic side to a 1-1 draw. Started the game really strongly, plenty of chances created, should have doubled the advantage, didn't get it. Athletic hit back. That's football, but I think there are signs of encouragement here, and I just think Sampioli's character compared to Lopetegui means we should see Sevilla take an all-or-nothing approach here. And I do think he'll instill a massive amount of belief and confidence back into this team. And as I say, I think Dortmund are gettable. And I think the market is very, very one-sided in Dortmund's favour here. The handicap is at 1. I don't think anyone would want to back Dortmund -1 in this game. So just because of the change in approach really from Sevilla just across 7 days. So Dortmund have played 12 games across the Bundesliga and the Champions League this season. They've conceded multiple goals in 5 of those, and even going back to Matchday 1 against Copenhagen at home, they gave up a few opportunities and chances as well. So I think Sevilla could definitely get on the score sheet here if they do take a front foot approach as they need to, and I think Dortmund obviously obliged as they tend to do at home anyway. So both teams scoring would be an interesting angle there for me.
Yeah, 1.83 currently both teams to score, yes. And it's the same price with Maccabi Haifa versus Juventus. And Miguel touched on Milan. Juventus at the weekend. Juventus have just had a really poor season, haven't they? And like with this game, are you kind of looking at that as, I suppose, as an anti-Juventus angle, and maybe Haifa can get on the score sheet here?
Bit of both. Juventus are dross. Have been for quite
I was trying to find the words and trying to be kind there and leave it up to you.
No, I'll tell you exactly that they're useless. They're going nowhere fast at the minute, and they're in a really bad place. They can't afford to sack Max Allegri at the minute, and Allegri out is trending daily at the moment in Italy. They beat Maccabi 3-1 in Turin. The scoreline masked what was another ordinary effort. Adrian Rabiot scoring twice. It's not exactly Juventus firing on all cylinders. And they lost the shot count at home to Maccabi Haifa 2016. They conceded over 2 expected goals. Maccabi hit the woodwork 3 times. So Juventus and their defence, which tends to be their strong point under Allegri, looked rattled, particularly in the second half, looked completely unsettled. And they're in a bad place at the minute. Obviously, the defeat against Milan at the weekend was just another fine example of that. But go back to the Benfica game as well. Huge pressure on them. So this is must win. And I don't see it being an easy ride at all. I watched a lot of the PSG game in Israel when they had Mbappe and Neymar and Messi, and they had to dig really deep for the points then. They even conceded 13 shots to Maccabi that day, over 1 expected goal. So if you look at Maccabi on their route to the group stage, their matches were pretty wild and chaotic, and that tends to be their style. They quite liked embracing this kind of rock and roll approach. And I think they can go and cause Juventus problems. Absolutely, they can. So I think they will put Juventus under pressure. Unfortunately for them, they're collectively, defensively, pretty porous themselves, and they've conceded twice or more in the last 6 Champions League ties, including qualifiers. So difficult to see them keeping Juve out, who are in desperation mode. But more than happy to back the host to get on the score sheet too.
Yeah, a couple of both teams to score plays there for Mark. Adrian, over to you. 2.24 the price for Bayer Leverkusen beating Porto. And I watched the highlights. They were pretty impressive. At least some great goals scoring, and great to see Hudson-Odoi getting an assist there. And he's
definitely, yeah. It's great to see him sort of getting starts and shining. Really, I'm gonna use it again. Let's just steal Mark's phrase of the day: "A week is a long time in football." I think you could say the same for Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously, Xabi Alonso's in. And the mood is very upbeat. Obviously, they beat Schalke. Schalke are not a good team. We know that. But they spanked them 4-0 at the weekend. And I think I was watching the goal show as well for the last match with Porto Leverkusen. And I had a lot of chances, a lot of good chances. They were a bit unlucky. They missed a penalty, Leverkusen. And things just conspired against them in the end. But I think they caused Porto plenty of problems on their own patch, and that's what they're about. They're a very attack-minded side. I was looking at the Bundesliga stats. Leverkusen, who haven't got off to a good start points-wise, have the second best expected goals from open play in the Bundesliga, behind guess who? Bayern Munich. So they carve out a lot of chances. Obviously, they've got good forward players like Schick, Hudson-Odoi, you chuck in there. Diaby is good. Frimpong got 2 at the weekend. So they've got goal threats against what I think is, by Porto standards, a very mediocre Porto. They've had some special players down the years, some really good teams. I wouldn't place this team as vintage Porto by any stretch. So, yeah, I think to get Leverkusen onside here at 2.2 in front of their own fans. Remember, they beat Atletico in front of their own supporters earlier on in the group. I think it's a pretty good price on a home win here. And Porto have a pretty shocking record in Germany. I was looking at that as well. They don't travel particularly well there. So, yeah, I think everything's up for grabs. Obviously, Bruges are the shock team of the group, 3 out of 3. But the other 3 teams, it's all to play for. And I think that Leverkusen know this is a match they really have to win. And I think they'll go for it. And I think they'll get the win.
Interesting stuff. Couple of good angles there from Mark and Adrian. And Miguel, you haven't quite got it as extreme as you did last time, where you covered the unders and both teams to score no in the one game. But you do like both teams to score in Spurs Frankfurt here.
Sorry. Both teams not to score.
Both teams not to score. Sorry.
Yeah. Again, it completely dictated by Conte's approach, especially of late, where Spurs haven't exactly been sparkling to watch. And it feels like he's kind of trying almost to grind them back to form almost. Sorry, but I should have turned that. The dong's off. I turned off WhatsApp and I hadn't turned off iMessage. But who messages iMessage these days? Spurs need a win here, so I think it's going to be one of those classically kind of tactical approaches from Conte. Maybe a bit more of an onus on Spurs to actually go for it, given they do need a win. And I mean, I'd nearly kind of bet on 1-0, 2-0 Spurs, but I think both teams not to score feels kind of judicious, just because there's that Conte in Europe, Spurs in Europe. There's that slight danger they could actually control the game, but in a kind of a very low margin match, get done.
Yeah, absolutely. Tottenham versus Frankfurt, both teams scored no, 2.1 currently on Matchbook. And if you do like the correct score shouts, particularly the hour before games, the margin's really tight on Matchbook, and we are invariably best price on all of them. And before we get into best bets, and if you don't have a Matchbook account and you do want to set one up, and we do currently have a £30 welcome offer. That's money back as a free bet if your first bet loses. You can place this on any sport from Champions League, Premier League, all the way to NFL horse racing. That's £30 welcome offer, money back as a free bet if your first bet loses. All you have to do is enter the bonus code INSIGHTS30. That's INSIGHTS30. I mentioned invariably we be best price and correct score, but even the 90-minute games, match results, our margin's really tight. And as I said, an hour before kickoff is the best time, and we're invariably best price on the majority of Premier League and Champions League games. So well worth checking out. And we're going to go for best bets here. Adrian, Mark, you're half in agreement, but I think your betting outlooks have kind of dictated this. Mark, very briefly, I know we've covered the game a lot, but do touch on in about 30 seconds or a minute about why you think Napoli in over 1.5 goals is a good way, and a 1.75 shot is a solid play.
Yeah, I mean, Napoli going through their best run ever at the minute, 8 successive wins across all competitions. But it's not just the wins and the results which are sort of standing out. It's the manner of those victories and the performances that they're putting in. I think any team that can go to Amsterdam, not just score 6 goals, but actually fire in 20 shots from inside the Ajax penalty area and rack up an XG of over 3.5 deserves maximum respect. We saw them destroy Liverpool in Naples. They've destroyed Ajax in Amsterdam. And this Ajax team are indifferent at the minute is probably the best way to describe their form, their outlook, their tactical approach. They're sort of struggling to sort of find themselves right now. And I think they're absolutely vulnerable coming into this game. They failed to really do anything when they went to Anfield on Matchday 2. So big game for them. They're going to have to come out and play, and I think that will just play into Napoli's hands. So I'm happy to back the winning streak extending this midweek by backing Napoli to win and over 1.5 goals. I'm basically just eliminating the 1-0 correct score and backing Napoli to win by any other correct score, which I think they're more than capable of doing.
Yeah, Adrian, I think you'll struggle to make a better case than that, but try.
Yeah. Not much to add, really. I mean, it was a 6-1 demolition, but it could have been 10-1 to Napoli in the game. Ajax, their structure was just all at sea. They sliced through them at will. It was an alarming performance from Ajax. and they've not had much time to recover from that. The mental scars will still be fresh, and Napoli in front of their own fans, who'll be be baying for more goals, more entertainment. I think they're going to go for it. There'll be absolutely no fear on their part. They'll take the game to Ajax, and I think they will find cracks in the Dutch side yet again. I think there is a slight gulf in class between Napoli right now and Ajax. So yeah, I'm going to go with Napoli to win absolutely, and just a little bit bolder. Over 2.5 goals is my selection.
Great stuff. And then Miguel, we've saved the best to last here. We're going for a repeat of last week, and in fairness, you got this up after 60 minutes with a disallowed goal there in as well. But take it away here on why the Bayern game at over 4.5 goals, currently available at 3.1, so that's over 2-1.
Yeah, I may as well finish as I went on throughout. And also, I think, Bayern do seem to have at least kind of worked out some of their attacking issues. They're a team with a bit of anger at the moment. They've obviously already trashed Pils, and I think they will also want a reaction to Saturday. And as Mark has already talked about, talking about German ruthlessness, this could be one of those classic cases. Also, home and away in these sort of situations doesn't matter too much to Bayern. And it's why I think that Pilsen could be in for another very, very difficult night. And even if you're to go almost spot on, 5-0 seems like, or 5-1 seems like a good score, which is why over 4.5, I'm quite confident in it.
Interesting. Victoria Pleasant versus Bayern over 4.5 goals, and if 5-1, you'd get that up well and truly. So, as Marcus touched on before, betting wise, it's nothing better than cheering on goals. So we'll lock those best bets in. If you've missed any of the bets, insights.matchbook.com. Full recap will be available from Monday lunchtime. My thanks to Adrian, my thanks to Mark, my thanks to Miguel. We'll be back Thursday morning. I think 8:30 a.m. is that. So set your alarms for that. That'll be in your podcast feeds from 11 a.m. But for now, take care, enjoy the Champions League, and we'll chat to you Thursday morning.